InvestorIdeas.com podcasts.
Good afternoon and welcome to another InvestorIdeas.com podcast following cannabis news, stocks to watch, as well as insights from thought leaders and experts. Today I'll be talking with Dr. Georgy Anastasov, CEO of Axim Biotechnologies Incorporated, trading on the OTC under the symbol Axim, regarding Axim's proprietary technology and the cannabis pharmaceutical market as a whole. George, if you could start with a little bit of your background as well as the background of Axim Biotechnologies Incorporated.
Sure. Well, my background, I'm a surgeon by education. I'm a craniofacial surgeon. I was in academic practice for a while at Mount Sinai School of Medicine here in New York, and I had a private practice as well, and I'm also a serial entrepreneur. We have a couple of companies that we have created through the years, and one of them is Sanamat Pharmaceuticals, which is a Dutch holding company, Dutch pharmaceutical company, and some 5 years ago we created a joint venture company with the Medical Marijuana Inc., which was the first publicly traded cannabis company in the United States, and so we provided intellectual property and the know-how to produce functional control-release chewing gum. They provided some capital. And so we created a joint venture company called Axim Biotechnologies, which was a private company, limited liability corporation. And eventually we acquired a publicly traded company, which at the time was called Axim International, which was involved in alternative energy procurement. And we kind of saw that there may be some symbiotic interest there because we do have IP related to alternative energy production from spent products of hemp extraction. And that's what gave birth to Axim Biotechnologies. And Axim Biotechnologies is a biotech and pharma company, which is, utilizing hemp and cannabis, hemp is cannabis products for different indications, both pharmaceutical and nutraceutical as far as, and alternative energy. So currently, Axim is pursuing two clinical tracks. One, we have completed a study on irritable bowel syndrome, a phase 2A study with chewing gum containing 15 milligrams of cannabidiol on a nutraceutical platform with quite encouraging results. So we have completed a proof of concept study on 3 dermatological indications. One is vitiligo, one is eczema, and one is psoriasis. Also with good results, and we are about to enter clinical trials in patients with pain and spasticity in multiple sclerosis, which also utilizes functional controlled release chewing gums, but which contain both CBD and THC in equal proportion, 5 and 5 milligrams. And we are formulating currently a bioequivalent product to Marinol, which contains synthetic THC, so-called dronabinol. And this will be in a chewing gum form as well. But speaking about chewing gums, of course, we are not solely concentrating on chewing gums, but other delivery platforms as well, such as transdermals and suppositories and so on and so forth. But why chewing gum? Well, because chewing gum, apparently, the act of chewing by itself, the mastication, has beneficial effects on the brain. It's a neuroprotective mechanism. And we didn't know much about it when we started because we were just looking for a solid delivery platform, something which is not pill or capsule or not smokable, of course, since smoking is harmful to the individuals. And we didn't know that the act of mastication has these types of beneficial effects. But we were working with the Free University of Amsterdam in the Netherlands, with the Department of Neurology, with Professor Schroeder. And at that time, he had a PhD candidate, Dr. Roxanne Weinberg, whose thesis was mastication as neuroprotection. And so that was quite interesting for us to learn that the act of chewing actually has all of these benefits. And that's where we thought that our system perhaps not only provides a reliable delivery of active pharmaceutical ingredients, whether cannabinoids or others, but also provides other physiological benefits which are related to the act of chewing. In which case you have 1 and 1 that makes 3, not 2. And but they're chewing gums and chewing gums. The trick here is to provide chewing gum which has controlled release. In other words, it should not release its actives very quickly, because if it does, then the patient will just swallow them, and it will have exactly the same effect as, let's say, oils which are available on the market or pills. And we don't want that to happen because, especially if we are talking about THC, when THC is swallowed, it goes to the first pass of liver metabolism, which results in quite toxic metabolites such as 8, 9, and 11-hydroxy THC, which are responsible for the negative side effects of THC, which is paranoid ideations, and so on. And so we want to avoid it. We don't want this to go to the first pass, and the way to avoid it is to prevent the systemic circulation through the oropharyngeal mucosal membrane. And so for this to happen, it has to release not very fast, and it should not release very slow, because what happens is that all of these components, they're oil-based, so whether it's THC or CBD, so they're lipophilic, and they may bind to the gum base in the chewing gum and never release. So it took us quite a few years to be able to provide something, to provide chewing gum which is actually controlled in release. So it should release within 20 to 30 minutes. It's active, and also it should release them in a predictable fashion, not binding to the gum. There are other gums available on the market which I think mostly are infringing on our IP. But we have investigated them, and we see that many of them, up to 100% of the CBD is just bound to the gum and never releases itself. So it's not that easy to produce this functional controlled release chewing gum, but we have accomplished it. We microencapsulate the cannabinoids to increase the bioavailability, and we also formulate the gum in such a way that the release of the API is predictable. So 76%, 80% of the cannabinoids are released in a predictable fashion. So that's what we do within Axim.
Thanks so much for that, George. Now, you work with both CBD and THC in your products, though CBD seems to be looked at as a sort of gold mine for the pharmaceutical and medical potential it has. Is there a preference with working with one chemical component or the other? And if so, why?
Well, let me backtrack here a little bit. As of today, there is over 140 different cannabinoids isolated from the plant. So it's not only CBD and THC, there is CB and CBG and so on. And we work with not only CBD and THC, we work with CBG as well, which is another incredibly interesting molecule, which you can call, if you wish, the stem cell of all cannabinoids, because all of the cannabinoids are derived from the CBG. And so I cannot say that CBD is a gold mine. It's probably a little bit better researched than other cannabinoids. And also it's not psychoactive. So if we're talking about THC, the drawback of THC is that it is psychoactive, and not everybody reacts well on this, and others, of course, prefer it because it does have psychoactive properties. There is another cannabinoid, which is CBN, excellent analgesic, but which also has slight psychoactive properties. So we can't say that CBD is better than THC. It's a question of what are we targeting here? What are we trying to treat? THC is an excellent antiemetic. That's why Marinol was approved by FDA in 1985. So we're talking a long time ago, right? It's a Schedule 3 drug currently. It's capsules. So I cannot say that one molecule is better than the other. It's all a question of what are we targeting. Well, if we are targeting osteoporosis, then we know that the CBD is better than THC. But if we are targeting chronic pain, then THC is probably better than CBD. And combinations of them probably can target different diseases. So I think that the question still remains, are the individual cannabinoids better individually, or are they better in concept? So we know about Meshulam's theory about the entourage effect, that cannabinoids taken together are working better than individual cannabinoids, but this is still to be proven because we know that Marinol, which is 99.9% pure THC, is actually quite effective, very effective in chemotherapy-related nausea and vomiting, as well as appetite loss and cachexia in patients with HIV/AIDS. So there is no other molecule there, it's just THC, and it's quite effective. So there are certain studies which are going on right now in Israel on patients with severe ADHD, and who are being treated with CBD, but CBD in pure form and CBD with other cannabinoids. So that will answer at least one of the questions, whether there is any benefit of having additional molecules added to CBD, or CBD by itself is just as efficient. So to try to answer your question, I cannot say that one of these molecules is better than the other. There are plenty of molecules. There is millions of combinations between them. Every plant has different proportions of cannabinoids, plus, of course, 400 plus other molecules. There are terpenes, antioxidants, and so on and so forth. So I think that the research is lacking there still. I mean, there's a lot of things being done, but obviously not enough to say that which one is more beneficial. It's a whole question of what disease we are targeting. So for different disease targets, there are different molecules which are more effective for one than the other. For example, epilepsy, we know that THC probably is not much active, doesn't have much activity, but CBD does in seizure disorder in general. So again, depends what we are targeting. There is not such a thing as one molecule is better than the other. They're extremely similar if you look at the chemical structure of CBD and THC, but they have totally different effects.
Thank you for that. Your company has recently expanded into more international markets, specifically Canada. What are some of the key differences you're finding between working in the US or working in Canada as far as the cannabis market is concerned?
Well, I think that if you're comparing two markets or two legal entities such as the U.S. and Canada, in Canada, it's much clearer and quite well delineated, which is not the case in the U.S., where there are differences between the states. So on the federal level, all the cannabinoids are illegal in the U.S. They're Schedule 1. That's not, and in Canada they're all regulated, but it doesn't mean that anyone can start selling tomorrow cannabinoid products. They have to have licenses from Health Canada, from the regulatory agencies, and their specific licenses, whether this for CBD or for THC. So this has to be requested and applied for individually. So I think that the Canadian market is much easier to navigate. But again, if you're comparing the Canadian market to American size-wise, the American, of course, is significantly larger. So, and as far as the legalization is concerned, I think that the purpose of the changes in Canada was not to allow the free float of cannabis on the market, but rather to regulate it. With other words, to try to eliminate illegal supplies of cannabis on the Canadian market, and which is, of course, very commendable. But the regulations are quite strict as well. I was recently in a World Congress of Cannabis in St. John in Canada, where there were governmental representatives, and so the idea that somehow it makes it much more accessible to the public is not quite so. The regulations are quite strict. For example, the penalties for selling cannabis illegally or close to, let's say, schools to minors and so on carry tremendous penalties, up to 14 years in prison and so on. So different markets, what benefits the Canadian market is that it's well regulated, and that's not the case in the United States. The market is not well regulated here. It's quite patchy, and but I guess that the regulations will change. We know that recently there is a CBD drug which was approved by the FDA and which was scheduled by the DEA. So I think that things are changing here.
Sorry, just to cut you off there for a second, George. You mentioned the DEA's recent decision to make Epidiolex of GW Pharmaceuticals Schedule 4 controlled substance. How does that affect Axim and the cannabis pharmaceutical market as a whole?
Well, I think that it's a very wise step on behalf of the regulatory agencies in the United States. The clinical evidence of the effectiveness of Epidiolex, that's the drug we're talking about, of GWs, is extremely compelling. I mean, it's not anecdotal evidence, and there are plenty of studies, phase 3 studies, which prove the efficacy of CBD in patients with rare seizure disorders such as Dravet syndrome and Lennox-Gastaut and tuberous sclerosis. So, I mean, the evidence is there, so it's not a question of public pressure or anything like that. The clinical evidence is there. And also, it's scheduled as a controlled substance. It's in Schedule 4, right, there with Robitussin and the likes. But it's a scheduled drug. So I think that it's the right step in the direction of regulating the market, because now the physicians who would like to prescribe CBD, there is a product which will be available, I think it's of November of this year, which makes it much, I guess, more accessible to the public, and also it's a regulated product, because currently there are many products claiming to contain CBD on the markets where it's legal in states which have legalized the cannabidiol. But really there is a lack of control. There is no consistency between the products, and which I think ultimately harms the public. So legalizing products which have supported its clinical effectiveness, such as Epidiolex, I think it's very commendable. And how does it affect our efforts? I think in a very positive way. We are following the same very steps as GW did through clinical trials, through regulatory pathways, through the EMA, through the FDA, through the CBG in the Netherlands, and so on and so forth. So I think that's the right way to serve the public. The products do have to go through the regulatory approvals, prove its efficiency, and they have to be GMP products. And unfortunately, there's only one product right now available, which is CBD containing, and that's Epidiolex. And there will be others. I mean, we are working on them, but as of now, there is only one. And I'm very glad that the DEA and the FDA has changed their opinion, because up until very recently, all of the cannabinoids were within Schedule 1, which means not only not useful, but useless and harmful with tremendous addictive potential. Well, scheduling CBD in Schedule 4 shows that the opinions have shifted, and that's commendable.
Absolutely. You mentioned a lot of the requirements needed to get a product to market. How difficult is it to make a cannabis or CBD or THC product versus any other type of pharmaceutical drug?
Well, it's the same like with any other drug. Just to give you a comparison here, a new molecular entity drug takes usually approximately 10 years to develop, and the cost of such R&D is in excess of $2.5 billion. So with cannabinoids, we don't have to go through such a rigorous process, because these molecules are well known. There are no new molecular entities unless there is a new molecular entity, as certain companies are working on synthetic derivatives which are similar to CBD or THC and so on. Well, of course, they will have to go through the same regulatory pathway, because these are new molecular entities. But CBD, THC, CBG, these are not new molecular entities, so the process is not as rigorous, but still you have to prove that they are not toxic, that they have limited addictive potential, and that they're efficient. So the pathway is exactly the same as for any other drug which will try to gain FDA approval and then DEA scheduling.
Thank you. And with that in mind, what are some of the next big steps for Axim specifically, and what do you think are some of the far-reaching potentials of your products?
Well, we don't know until we pass through phase 3, once we're in phase 4. Until that happens, I think it's very difficult to predict as to how things will happen. So far, we are reaching our milestones. We had certain delays. For example, with the MS product, we should have been already in phase 3. We are not, because, of course, we are young biotech pharma company. It's all related to finances, and it's not that easy to finance these types of projects. But so far, we are meeting our milestones, and we're optimistic. So I hope that we will have within the next 2 years or so, maybe 3 products on the market if everything goes well. And then we have a deep pipeline of a number of different projects which we are kind of slowly moving forward. And I think for any company working in this field, you can't put all of your eggs in one basket and just work on a singular product. We know what happened to GW's Sativex product, which was intended to treat pain in cancer patients. It failed after significant expenditures financial. So you can't really think that you have a panacea there, that one product fits all the indications. So that's why we're working on multiple and not related indications, and hopefully at least some of them will prove to be successful.
Thank you for that. We've touched on this a little bit throughout the interview, but I just wanted to know if you could expand a little bit on what are some of the biggest difficulties you are finding facing a pharmaceutical company that's entering into the cannabis space right now?
It's as we spoke already. I mean, there is no two plants alike, even if they go up 1 centimeter apart. One has to develop truly cGMP cannabinoids to enter into clinical trials. And there is no access to this, because there is only one company in the world that has cGMP plant, cannabis plant. That's Bedrocan from the Netherlands. with which company we work. So first, the difficulty number one is to find good plant. Second, these are all Schedule 1 plants, so the access to this is extremely difficult. We work with the government of the Netherlands, with the Ministry of Health, with the Medical Cannabis Bureau for the last 14, 15 years. So we do have all the regulatory licenses to be working in this field, which is not that easy. Recently there was a big hoopla about Tilray getting the limited license to provide CBD capsules to the University of California, San Diego, which drove their stock to the stratosphere, which I think is totally irrational, because this is not a product which is approved. It's for a limited trial, and nobody knows if it will work in the first place. So access to cannabinoids is hard because of the regulatory framework and because of lack of this type of plants. So you need licenses to export, to import, to move it around, and to enter clinics. So the regulatory framework is extremely difficult, and I think that's there are a lot of difficulties to work with these types of products. And there is no availability. It's only one company which is producing it, which is controlled by the Ministry of Health of the Netherlands. So you cannot just call them and say, hey, send me here 100 kilos of plant. It doesn't happen this way. So, but hopefully things will change. There is going to be more access to plants. But just to give you an example, to have a CGMP certificate for a plant, that means that you have to isolate every singular molecule from this plant, and you have to make sure that your clones of this plant will be absolutely the same from plant to plant. So it took Baselkamp 30 years to accomplish that. So I think that maybe there will be other companies which will come up with similar quality products, but it will take some time for this to happen.
Fair enough. You've mentioned a couple times just how lacking the science and research and some of the clinical trials are in the cannabis space, especially in the pharmaceutical market so far. How far off do you think we are from really realizing the full potential of the cannabis plant with all the different chemical compounds that are in it? And what do you think that future will look like when we're there?
Well, I would say the following, that we still don't know more than we know about the plant. It's an extremely complex plant. It's probably the oldest plant on the face of the earth. It's 22 million years old. So quite a complex plant with many molecules and continuously new ones being discovered. We don't know exactly what they do. We know about the endocannabinoid system, of course, but still there is much more that we don't know. We know that the cannabinoids, they participate in just about any physiological process in the body, not only human, but microorganisms and so on. But what exactly they do, how exactly they interact among themselves, there is lots that we don't know. So, I don't know if we will ever utilize the full potential of the plant. We just don't know what is the full potential of the plant. But as far as cannabis-based pharmaceuticals, I think that we will see more and more on the market approved. Currently we have very few. We have the dronabinol, which is synthetic THC. We have a few different ones based on dronabinol, like Syndrome from Insys and so on. Now we have a CBD product finally, which is Epidiolex of GW. But I think that within the next decade there will be much more other products. How many? It's difficult to say, because if you look at the FDA during the last year, there were only 30-some new drugs approved. So I think that it will be foolish to think that within the next year we're going to have 50 cannabis-based products. It's just not going to happen. Yeah, maybe there will be another one or two, but not tens of them. So I think that within the next 10 years, maybe there will be another 10 products out there, but time will tell.
Thanks so much, George. It's been a pleasure having you on the podcast today, and I'll be looking at Axim's future as you guys move into the next phases of your clinical trials.
The same here. You have a wonderful weekend.
Once again, that was Dr. Georgi Anastasov of Axim Biotechnologies Incorporated. And that's all for today's podcast. Podcast is now a certified word trademark on the blockchain through Cognate Incorporated CM certification. InvestorIdeas.com podcasts are also available on iTunes, Spotify, Google Play Music, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, TuneIn, and Spreaker. If you'd like to be a guest or sponsor of this podcast, please contact InvestorIdeas.com. Investor Ideas reminds all listeners to read our disclaimers and disclosures on the InvestorIdeas.com website, and this podcast is not an endorsement to buy products or services or securities. Investors are reminded that all investments involve risk and possible loss of investment. Investor Ideas does not condone the use of cannabis except where permissible by law, and our site does not possess, distribute, or sell cannabis products.